Hello there. This is part two of my retrospective review of the Damned discography. If you missed part one, I have a link in the description. I'd like to make an additional note to episode one. I know I listed the song Idiot Box as one of the least favorite tracks on the Music for Pleasure record, but I failed to mention that this song is a diss track to the New York band Television because they refused to play a show with the Damned. That aspect of the song I love. I mean, Television always struck me as too arty-farty for their own good. I know they are iconic to the old CBGB scene, but I mean, come on, this is punk. Stop trying to highbrow people. Totally missing the point. So giving the finger to Television is awesome. Thank you, Captain. But I still think the song is a bit of a chore to get through. Anyways, thought that was an interesting little tidbit and wanted to share. This era of the Damned produced many of the band's concert staples, which arguably makes this the band's most beloved period and what I would regard as their classic era. That would consist of David Vanian, Captain Sensible, Rat Scabies, and a revolving door of bass players. The trilogy of albums I'm going to talk about today are so phenomenally good, each containing their own distinct personalities, while at the same time cementing the band's signature sound going forward without co-founder and former songwriter Brian James. Within this span of 4 years, the Damned were absolutely on fire and rolling up their sleeves and working hard to put themselves out there. But before I get into the specifics, first a little context. The music scene had changed a lot in just the 2 years between 1977 and the end of 1979. Punk had knocked down a lot of doors for certain acts to get discovered and reach a larger audience. Its influence had reached the mainstream already. Exhibit A would be the emergence of the New Wavers, the more consumer-friendly version of punk, which blew up in the UK as well as the US and would continue in the following decade. Even the Rolling Stones dabbled in it. There was what is called the new wave of British heavy metal, which was beginning to bubble and froth in the UK underground at this time, and it would absolutely explode in the 1980s. Punk had some crossover with that scene as well, which we will talk about again a bit later. We're also starting to hear what would later be labeled as post-punk with bands such as Joy Division, magazine started by former Buzzcocks member Howard Devoto, and Public Image Limited, also known as Pill, that was Johnny Rotten's band after he left the Pistols. Joy Division in particular was a remarkable band and sadly short-lived. They would reform and achieve commercial success as New Order. 1979 was also the year Bauhaus released the single Bela Lugosi's Dead, which started goth rock in earnest. It should be noted that David Vanian was sporting the vampire look on stage already a few years before. Captain Sensible is said to have chided and called out Bauhaus, accusing them of stealing his singer, of course purposely confusing his man David Vanian for Bauhaus singer Peter Murphy. So Vanian, in my mind, is in fact the first gothic rocker. I can't think of anyone else doing the Dracula thing before him. I mean, even his stage name, David Vanian, Transylvanian, I mean, come on. He was working that vampire angle from the start. And by the end of the 1980s, the look was pretty commonplace. I mean, every high school had at least one of them. You know who I'm talking about. I mean, would Hot Topic even exist without David Vanian? Perhaps a question for another time. But the main point here is by 1979, we have goth, which is going to grow and evolve over the next decade and beyond. Disco was declining in popularity by 79, but just a month before the first album of this damned trilogy hit the shelves, a single called Rapper's Delight was released by New York's Sugar Hill Gang. While not the first rap song ever, it is hip-hop's first mainstream hit, reaching the top 40 in the United States and the top 3 in the UK. It signaled to the world that there was a new kid in town, so to speak. Hip-hop's rebellious nature, DIY aesthetics, and relevance to street culture, for lack of a better phrase, did catch the attention of a few familiar faces in the punk rock scene, including our friend Captain Sensible, but we will get to that later as well. The punk scene itself remained intact, spawning a new generation, new looks, new sounds. However, the musical landscape had changed so much in so little time as new genres, subgenres, and trends and fads began sprouting up everywhere. Suddenly, there was a lot of competition for attention and new fans. I mean, this is great for the consumer, much more variety, but difficult for bands to stand out in the crowd and be noticed. I mean, punk rock suddenly wasn't the only option for young people to piss off their parents. I mean, the 1980s were knocking on the door, and the Damned no longer were among the few and the proud competing against the over-the-top and unrelatable prog rock bands and the disco money-making machine. For the record, I like prog rock and I like disco, but I can completely understand why punk was a reaction to both of these. Anyways, due to the nature of the overcrowded playing field, if this was the time for the Damned to make a comeback, it was best to put everyone on notice, charging guns blazing, and take no prisoners.
Ladies and gentlemen, how do?
So the band unleashed Machine Gun Etiquette in November 1979, and my God, what an opening salvo it was. Machine Gun Etiquette is a Kaiser of a comeback if I've ever heard one. David Vanian on vocals, Rat Scabies on drums, Captain Sensible finally getting his moment to shine on guitar, and Algie Ward on bass, formerly of the legendary Australian punk band The Saints. Song list, we have Love Song, Machine Gun Etiquette, I Just Can't Be Happy Today, Melody Lee, Anti-Pope, These Hands, Plan 9, Channel 7, Noise, 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 Looking at You, an MC5 cover because, of course, there's an MC5 cover, it's a Damned album, Liar, and the immortal Smash It Up Parts 1 and 2. This record straddles that line between what the band was in the Brian James era while pushing the boundary of what punk rock could be. And brilliantly, they took risks that paid dividends. It's lighthearted and funny in some parts, yet in some instances, the band is heavier than ever. And while doing this, the songs allow the music to breathe. In other words, it's much more dynamic than previous offerings, with breakdowns and interludes that build and weave parts of the songs together. An example is the piano intro to Melody Lee. I mean, this is something that you would never expect on a punk recording just a couple years prior. At moments, this record challenges the listener who may put on the record expecting just blast beats and buzzsaw guitars. The Damned say, "Oh, you like the first records? That's great, but maybe you will like this too." And it takes off. It's really a triumph for the band and for the genre in general. And while their palette of sound and subject matter is expanded upon greatly, more keyboards and pianos, instrumental sections with an improvisational feel, they also stay true to their roots. I mean, Detroit hard rock, 60s garage rock, psychedelia, and an affinity for the strange and the interesting. I mean, this is what makes the Damned at the end of the day. It's their DNA. But we get an explosion of creativity that gives the band fresh new life while at the same time not sounding like a completely different band under the same name. This new approach the band took is built upon a foundation. This was a smart move, whether it was instinctual or not. I've seen far too often bands drop an album in their careers that are such radical departures from what fans expect that it alienates everyone, and even sometimes breaks up the band. Or even worse, they double down and continue to make their fans miserable. On the flip side, I've seen bands lean into their gimmicks way too hard and end up becoming stale or risk becoming parodies of themselves. It can go either way. It's all about balance and having good instincts when it comes to these types of things. Testing the water and playing to your strengths. Sometimes it's better to play conservative and just crank out a direct sequel to what is expected. I mean, not to discourage artists from taking risks. Sometimes the occasion calls for something new. The artist is inspired and creates something, and it's just the right sound at the right time, and it just takes off. But it's important not to walk off of a cliff while exploring the outer limits. So back to some cold reality here. If you want to be a touring band that is successful, and the Damned defined success as not having to go to a day job, being professional musicians. In order to do that, you have to sell tickets, records, and merch. And to do that, there has to be an element of giving the people what they want, or no one's going to show up to pay. I mean, the band is a product. I know it doesn't sound romantic and artistic, but someone's got to say it. Might as well be me. But Machine Gun Etiquette, to me, is the perfect mix. It gives Damned fans some continuity and familiarity, which then opens the listener's mind to new things. It's the perfect balance, and this is why I believe this album is so beloved. Songwriting and lyric credits are shared equally among the band, as well as some special guest ghostwriters, which is great in the sense that they were able to fix some of the political problems started during the Brian James dictatorship. I mean, Brian's lyrics were great. They had that punk edge, and that made for an excellent debut. However, the Damned needed something else to say, a fresh new perspective, and that is exactly what is offered in the lyrics on this record. I mean, everyone got to share the publishing money and have an equal stake in the band's success. And look, some bands work out with a leader. I mean, they have a high turnover, but they have longevity. But more often than not, they don't, especially if and when the band becomes profitable. Now, the downside of this arrangement is that it's difficult to discover who wrote what without digging. And that's more of a me problem than a Damned problem, of course. A majority of the lyrics on this record appear to be written by Cap. Captain really gets to flex his chops as a lyricist and songwriter on this album. But there are offerings from Rad and Vanian as well. I'd like to highlight a few songs worthy of note here. The opener, Love Song, displays the wit of the band. It's a meta love song, equal parts earnest and sarcastic, hence the generic title. I believe Captain penned this one, but I've also seen a source claiming it was Vanian. When looking up sources, I of course try to find interviews, but sometimes I dig up articles from other reviewers on random sites that I don't necessarily find credible. Honestly, I think this was a Captain song. It fits his style and sense of humor. Vanian songs are much more dramatic and often dark and morose. I Just Can't Be Happy Today is a look into a world that is rigid, cold, and Orwellian. Without going too far on a tangent, I think the dreary lyrics and main body of the song are juxtaposed with a Captain keyboard solo that is just triumphant and uplifting. It's a part in the clouds and a burst of sunlight. It's pretty brilliant. Antipope at first comes across as a juvenile punk rant about the rigidity, judgmental, and general repressiveness of organized religion. However, what sets this song apart from thousands of punk songs whining about authority figures is the nuance Captain gives the song. Quote, I've got nothing against church or any people that go there. He's saying, look, I understand that some people need it and enjoy it, but it's just not my thing. I don't get it. Going to a building once a week to atone for being a shitty person doesn't make you a righteous person. You're still a shitty person, and you are using religion as an excuse to be a shitty person, or just an opiate to numb you from said shittiness of everyday life instead of dealing with problems in an effective way. I mean, God helps those who helps themselves, right? That's what they say. So he's having a laugh at religious people's expense while at the same time saying, hey man, you do you. And this kind of nuance and depth is rare in a punk song of this type, the rant song. And the Captain pulls it off in one line in the refrain. I mean, this is an angry song, but it's smart. And there's a lot packed in there if you think about it. It's good stuff. I'd like to talk briefly about the song These Hands. The song is from the perspective of a circus clown that takes people laughing at him personally. He then muses and fantasizes about chasing down the person he is speaking to and strangling them to death as he laughs. Who in the hell wrote this? It is strange, it is creepy, very dark sense of humor. If I had to guess, I'd say this has Vanian written all over it. Maybe Rat. Rat's more of a sledgehammer than lyrically. I'm guessing it's Vanian. However, I haven't been able to find a source confirming that. It was a song I'd skip as a teenager because I wanted to get to the more faster, punkier, heavier stuff. It seemed like a throwaway filler song at the time, and I suppose it still kind of is, but I've done a complete 180 on it. Now I never skip it. I love it. Then, of course, there is Smash It Up Parts 1 and 2, which more or less eclipsed New Rose as the band's signature song. It was originally written as a 4-part suite, but the label only gave the studio treatment to the first 2 parts. Part 1 is an instrumental dedicated to the passing of T-Rex frontman Mark Bolan. While some of rock's old guard derided punk, particularly on the business end of things, and, the critics, Mark seemed to really dig it and took the Damned under his wing. He took them on tour as an opening band. He befriended them. He died in a car crash September 16th, 1977, a month after Elvis. Upon hearing the news, Captain wrote Part 1 and sat on it for 2 years, I guess. And now the band plays that song probably every show as a nod to him. Part 2 is sort of a middle finger to everyone. A lot like the song Neat, 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 this song is about frustrated youth, seeking action, bucking trends, shunning hipsters and fakes, walking the walk and not just talking the talk. Ironically, it's also the most pop-sounding, commercially accessible song on the whole album. I mean, it's damn catchy. It has that driving 1960s garage rock keyboard part, light-hearted and fun to listen to. Definitely one of those showstopper type songs. However, bassist Algie Ward wasn't feeling it, and wasn't feeling the 60s garage pop vibes, so Captain had to step in and play bass on the recording. The title track, Algie Ward played guitar as well as bass. It's the heaviest and fastest song on the album. It's kind of the album's mission statement, quote, "No more getting pushed around, back to haunt you with our sound second time around." I mean, this is the comeback song. Another little piece of trivia for you. This is actually a recycled Rat song from his previous band, the Whitecats. The Whitecats were formed after Rat left the Damned in late 1977, as the original run of the band was on the skids after the release of the lackluster Music for Pleasure record. Only a few demos and John Peel sessions exist of the Whitecats, and those are pretty rare. The Whitecats also lent part of their name to the punk rock supergroup The Vicious White Kids, featuring Sid Vicious, Glenn Matlock, formerly of the Sex Pistols, and founder of the band Rich Kids, and of course, Rat. Hence, Vicious White Kids. The more you know. But the lyrics are basically the Damned saying, "We're back and we're here to claim our space." I mean, this song is a banger, and I found all the history of the song pretty interesting. Plan 9, Channel 7, is David Vanian's love letter to actress Mela Nurmi. Forgive the mispronunciation. It's Finnish. I don't know. She is known for her role as Vampira in the cult B-rate horror movie Plan 9 from Outer Space. It chronicles the rumored love affair between her and the ill-fated actor James Dean. Again, we got David doing the vampire thing, and this song is just a gorgeous bit of goth. I mean, Bela Lugosi, also in the movie, is the male vampire archetype, and Vampira is the female counterpart. I mean, for whatever reason, Plan 9 and Vampira have carved out a niche in the punk rock culture. I mean, Glenn Danzig's label was called Plan 9, and the Misfits even have a song about Vampira called Vampira. But I digress. Vanian kills it on vocals. His overdubs are amazing, and Captain's guitar work is right on the money. So this seems like a good place to segue into Captain's guitar work. He can do the blues riffing like previous records, but with his own style. He doesn't just copy Brian James's flair, he makes it his own. The difference between James and Captain is that James is more aggressive and likes to fill every beat with a bomb. Captain is much more adept at playing the spaces in between the notes. I mean, he can play fast when he wants, but also likes to let the music breathe. Different approach to blues derived music. I mean, you got the electric and loud Chicago style, and then the slower, spacey Delta style. Captain's guitar takes the listener through a variety of colors and emotions. His phrasing and use of space and time just adds a new dimension to the guitar portion of the band. And he brings it all to the party here on this record. He has a lot more in his bag of tricks. His use of feedback on anti-pope and looking at you. He at times plays the guitar as a percussive instrument as opposed to just a melodic one, which is reminds me of Syd Barrett from the early Pink Floyd days. He plays keyboards and pianos. He rocks a bass solo on anti-pope. He does twin guitar harmony, backup tracks on Noise, 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 which I love. I'm a sucker for twin harmonizing lead guitars. Some punk purists may call this overproduced, but I think it makes for a great recording, and Captain can still hold his own live regardless, so it's a moot point for me, honestly. And while his tone may not have the grit that Brian James had, it is clean and relaxed when it wants to be. It can be aggressive and fast when it needs to be, out in front and melodic when it needs to be, but also fade into the mix and blend when it needs to. In contrast, the Brian James style was more about brute force. Turn up the amp and shred. And Brian James does one thing, and not to make that sound negative, but he does. I'm not talking about his work in Lords of the New Church. I am talking about his guitar work within the context of The Damned. And Brian does that one thing really, 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 really well. I love the Brian James era. Damn, Damn, Damned is a colossal record. But Captain is by far, in every metric, the more technically and musically versatile Damned guitarist and musician in general. Vanian levels up here as well. I mean, his vocals are much more melodic and rich. Again, not all punk has to be screaming and screeching. Vanian does it all. He can sass and snarl with the rest of them, but he's a legit singer. Again, I have to circle back to Plan 9 Channel 7. I mean, what a performance. Definitely the high point for Vanian on this record and a sign of things to come. I mean, we can hear the difference between him in 77 and him here. We're beginning to hear Vanian come out of his shell and become more confident in his ability to carry a tune. That dark and brooding baritone voice crooning over the mayhem is straight out of the Doors playbook. As the years go on, Vanian will continue to hone his craft, but it is here that we witness him graduate from raw talent to a vocal craftsman and songwriter in his own right. Rad is a drum assassin as usual, and along with the guitar portion of the music, the drums show much more dynamic range and versatility on Machine Gun Etiquette. I mean, pounding kicks and snares and crashes with reckless abandon are still on the menu, but the man can shift gears. It's more about establishing and maintaining a groove on this record. Some examples are the percussive breakdowns in Anti-Pope and Looking at You. I mean, check it out, everyone. The punk rocker can vamp like a jazz drummer. And while we're here, Rat makes the song Looking at You. I mean, the Damned blow the original right out of the water. No disrespect intended for MC5. But when Rat and Captain bring the song down into that psychedelic break and they just sit in the pocket, circling around like a shark in the water, and then Vanian gives the vocal cue and bam.
I saw into the dancing crowd, felt like screaming out loud. Saw you standing there, saw your long hair.
Gets me every time. It's so cool. Dynamics, baby. When used correctly, they're effective. A brief tangent here. As a young punk, I hated hearing my music teacher and adults talk about how punks and metalheads weren't really musicians because they were too loud all the time. They were complaining about dynamics. And they had a point, obviously. I just said as much. However, how come these same people never criticize songs like The Beatles' Yesterday for its lack of dynamics? That song is slow and quiet the whole damn time. No dynamics at all. By their own definition, that song isn't music either. Obvious bias and complete bullshit. Look, some songs need to be loud. Some need to be quiet. If you got the use of dynamics in your toolbox, use them. Or don't. Have a good time. But when it works, it really works. Let's talk about Algie Ward. Algie Ward has a great bass tone, uses that heavy pick to pound on those strings, really aggressive in those mids, and just sits in the mix really well. His bass lines are more intricate and interesting as opposed to what we were used to on the first two Damned albums when Captain played the instrument, all the while remaining tight with the drums. I mean, Ward played a mean guitar as well on songs Machine Gun Etiquette and Liar. However, Algie didn't seem to want to play anything he didn't want to play. And didn't. He didn't like doing something, he wasn't doing it. It was alleged from the Damned and the crew that Algie wouldn't even get his bass out of its case before a show unless he could be bribed with a bottle of booze. I mean, the rest of the band thought that Algie's indulgences were him hamming it up and trying to craft this fake party animal rock hero persona, only to realize that the man drank, smoked, and fist fought his way through life because that was actually who he was. If you watch the music video for Smash It Up, you'll notice that Rat is playing the drums with a black eye. And guess who gave it to him? In a fist fight, while on set. In short, Algie can be described as an asshole. I mean, most of the members of every band he's been in could agree. He was drunk, unreliable, and unpredictable. He was not long for this band and was fired shortly after the album's release. I mean, Algie was a walking embodiment of everything your mother was warned about concerning punk rock. And there's a beauty in it. I mean, we can all look back and laugh, but I imagine working with the guy at the time would have totally sucked. Algie would go on to start heavy metal band Tank. Remember when I mentioned the new wave of British heavy metal in the beginning? Well, Tank is considered one of the beloved cult bands of that early scene. Their first album, Filth Hounds of Hades, is considered a cult classic, which was produced by Motorhead guitarist Fast Eddie Clarke. Today, there exist two versions of Tank. There is the version with Ward and a group of hired hands, and then there is the version of the band with every other member. Again, Algie is an asshole. In interviews today, the Damned don't really say anything bad about him. Bygones are bygones, I guess. However, I'm not sure if Rat would have the same opinion. Little Easter egg for fans, in an episode of Netflix's Stranger Things, a Tank Filth Hounds of Hades poster can be seen on the wall of character Billy's bedroom. So whoever is designing the set for Stranger Things, I see you. Well done. Extra pop culture cool points for you. But Filth Hounds is an album written by Heschers about Heschers for Heschers. I mean, it's worth checking out and cracking a beer with if that is your thing. To produce this album, the band signed to indie label Chiswick and went to work with label co-founder Roger Armstrong in the production chair along with a team of engineers. We finally get back to the more grimy production quality than the sterile clinical treatment that the second album, Music for Pleasure, got. I mean, enough headroom to make the loud parts stand out and the quiet parts sound more dramatic. Cool dynamic contrasts. While not something incredible to write home about, the production is adequate, and it seems that the band got someone in the studio who knew what they were trying to accomplish and aided them in achieving it. More trivia. During the overdubs for Machine Gun Etiquette, the Clash were in the room next door trying to finish what many consider to be the band's magnum opus, London Calling. So imagine Machine Gun Etiquette and London Calling being worked out right then and there in the same building. Oh, what a time. Would kill to be a fly on the wall for that. Of course, there was some good camaraderie between the two rivals. I mean, members of the Clash are featured as backup vocalists on the song Machine Gun Etiquette and Noise, Noise, Noise. It's really cool. I mean, there are also some pranks too. Legend has it that David Vanian brought a tank of helium into the studio because he liked to play with the way it made his voice sound. Simple pleasures. Eventually, the boys grabbed a condom, filled it with helium, drew a crude picture of Mick Jones on it, and let it loose in the studio where the Clash were set to record. Apparently, Mick did not find this very amusing, and the studio crew took turns trying to throw darts at it to get it down because apparently nobody knew where to get a ladder. Funny story if it's true. In summation, Machine Gun Etiquette is a masterpiece that proved to the boys and the world that they could still make good music without Brian James. It was just what they needed to put the band back on the map, and it almost needed to be a masterpiece because, like I said in the introduction, the Damned had a lot more competition out there at this stage in the game, and they'd been away for a while. The world was changing, and musical styles, trends, and fads were going along for the ride. I have a feeling that if this album wasn't a breakthrough classic that it turned out to be, it could have drastically changed the course of the band's direction for the worse, or even ended them right then and there. It's difficult to make a comeback record, especially in a time of changing trends. I mean, finger has to be on the pulse, or you risk sounding like yesterday's news. But yeah, Machine Gun Etiquette, widely regarded as a punk rock classic from fans and those in the know, and may even be considered the best by the band as a whole. And I believe the main reason for this, talent aside, was the balancing act between the familiar and the new, the continuity of the band's previous identity while bringing in the new dimensions of sound. Crucial to get that mixture right to avoid stagnation on the one hand and alienation of fans on the other. And of course, there's timing. I mean, you don't want to be too far ahead of your time, and you don't want to be part of the fad. I own Machine Gun Etiquette on vinyl and CD. I would suggest getting the CD version because the bonus tracks are incredible. I mean, you got a great cover of Sweet's Ballroom Blitz, which was a B-side to the Just Can't Be Happy Today single. Lemmy from Motorhead plays the bass on that. Yes, Lemmy was the Damned bassist before Algie joined the band. Played a few gigs and left the band in order to continue his career with Motorhead. But my God, if I had a time machine, a Damned concert with Lemmy on bass, that would be close to the top of the list. Another awesome cover. This time it is Jefferson Airplane's classic White Rabbit. Badass cover, and its B-side Rabbit for You is also one of my favorite Damned deep cuts. The song sounds like it has a drum machine on it, however. I have not been able to confirm this. The liner notes say it's right on drums, but I don't know. Seems suspicious. It's a really cool song. Interesting guitar textures. I have nothing against drum machines, but I mean, come on. Listen to those hi-hats, man. It sounds a lot like a drum machine. There is Suicide from the B-side of Love Song. On the other CD versions, you can also get demos of Smash It Up Parts 3 and 4, completing the Captain Punk Rock Suite. All of this can be yours, and I couldn't recommend it highly enough. Worth it to have in your collection. It eclipses Damn Damn Damned and arguably surpasses it in some ways. Badass record, and I always enjoy listening to it. Least favorite track, I've already copped to believing that These Hands is a filler song, but I think Liar is the worst. There's nothing wrong with Liar per se. It's a good song. I mean, all of the songs on Machine Gun Etiquette are good. The lyrics are just a little bit too angsty in a juvenile way and makes it sort of the generic punk song on the record. But I mean, I still like it. It's much, much more difficult to pick out a favorite. I don't know if I can. To me, the album plays like a greatest hits compilation. I guess if I had to pick one, it would be Plan 9 or Love Song. At the time of this recording, I'm going to have to go with Plan 9. But I mean, that could change tomorrow. It depends on how I'm feeling. So at this point in the band, they've built some momentum and are now looking for a new bass player. They will soon find one in veteran musician Paul Gray, and things are going to get darker and weirder. So I'm going to leave it there for now. There is so much more to say about these records that I am well over a half an hour, and I've only talked about the first album in the trilogy. I'd prefer to leave things in small, digestible bites. Leave people wanting more rather than giving an hour and a half long documentary that people change the channel halfway through, you know? And in the spirit of punk rock, if the song sucks, hey, at least it's short, you know? The old saying goes. So I'm leaving this as part 2A, and part 2B is already well in the works, so the wait will not be quite as long as before. Perhaps in the future I'll consider making longer videos. If that is something you want to see, then please leave a comment. I always want to know what you think. Well, not always. I mean, let's be honest. I know as someone who watches YouTube a lot, personally, I like shorter videos. It's rare that I can sit through over an hour, let alone 3 of one piece of content at a time. I like to watch multiple videos, so I like short, concise bits of information, but that's just me. If most people out there want to spend time listening to me yakking about whatever for an hour or more a pop, maybe that's something we'll do. We'll see. As always, thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.